All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the podcast. On this Independent Creatives podcast, we talk to independent comic creators, writers, artists, get their inspirations. What is it that they are working on? Today, I have my new friend Jimmy with me. Jimmy, you want to give us an introduction?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. I've been in the comic book industry since 1991 and been working. I started working primarily in independence and working for smaller publishers as a comic book inker. So I spent my career from then till now inking and working with various pencilers and artists.
Hmm. So you started out in 1991. What was the book that you started? Like, who were you working with? Was Image out then or no?
Image was the big hot thing at that
Mhm.
time. And being in Texas, and they were primarily most of them were in California.
Mhm.
And this is pretty much pre-internet. Well, the internet was around, but most of us didn't have a computer or have
Mhm.
internet in the home. So at the time, so a lot of it was done by mail. But luckily, there's a company here in town that was just a few miles away from me, and my first wife said, saw that I wanted to get into comic books, and so she said, "Well, at the time I was 18, I think, and we were getting ready to have our first child, and she said, it's time to get a job. If you're going to do this now. If not, forget this and let's move on." And she called up the company was Anarchy Press. She called them up, scheduled an interview for me, and I knew nothing about comic books. I had just started drawing 6 months before that, and I mean I had never drawn. I grew up very very poor, and and also I'm a cancer survivor, so I had
Okay.
cancer as a very small child, as a toddler. So when I grew up, um, I spent a lot of time in the hospital, so I didn't have a childhood. And then growing up very poor, wasn't exposed to things that most artists are exposed. I mean, young artists are exposed to, and where your dad collected comics or they buy you video games. I didn't have any of that, so I started drawing at at about age 18. I was getting ready to turn 19. She sets up the interview for me, and we go we go for this interview. And when I get there, I get nervous. We're right outside the door of the studio, and I said, "Let me catch my breath. Let me take a moment here." And she goes, "Okay, I'm gonna go inside and let them know you're here." And I said, "Great. Here's my portfolio. We hold this for me because I'm just gonna just take a moment out here." And so I'm outside talking to myself, hyping myself up and everything. Take a few minutes. I guess I took a little longer than just a few minutes because by the time I walked back in, it was all men. It was all guys in 1991. There were very very few girls in comics. And, there wasn't that common. And I walk in there and into the lobby, and suddenly there's about 15 of these guys crowded all around my ex-wife, and she's got the portfolio open, and they're going through the portfolio, telling her how wonderful the art is, and oh, it's so amazing and everything. And I'm just standing there. Nobody's even noticed me, and I start to hear all the compliments, and it builds up my confidence. I'm like, yeah, wow. And I lean over and I just go, wow, thank you, thanks. And everybody kept looking at me like, why are you taking the credit? Like, what are you doing? And they go back and they continue ignoring me, and they're going through and they're talking with her. And I just start going, yeah, I didn't know how to do this stuff, so I did a lot of it on photocopy paper, and I mean I was drawing on a larger art paper that was like that you run through a photocopier. And I explained this to them, and they all stop, and I think at that moment they realize, oh, we're not interviewing her, it's this guy applying. So I don't I don't even exaggerate that. This is not even an exaggeration. I swear there are about 15 of them there. They
Uh-huh.
all got up, turned around, and just like walked away when they found out it was me. They all go back to their desks. So Ben Dunn, the publisher, he finally comes out of his office and he walks down and he calls me back there. He goes, "Come on." And I walk back there and I put together my portfolio, and he goes, I take my portfolio back there. He said, "Come on, come join me in my office." I said, "All right." And my ex-wife stayed out front. there in the lobby. And I remember all the guys went back to their desks. So I just told her, you can be okay. You can be out here by yourself. She's like, yeah, I'll wait out here. And so I go follow Ben. I go all the way down the hallway to an open bullpen where you see all the artists working, all the desks. And it was amazing to see, a studio of artists. I'd never seen that before. And I just went, wow. I was like, I had gotten the golden ticket to Wonka's factory or something. So excited. So I go to the back and I go into Ben Dunn's office. And when I walk in, I look down on the coffee table, and he had a huge office, and he had this little coffee table in his office. And when I look down at it, he's got open magazines of BSM or BDM, stuff with whips, chains.
Okay.
It's catalog to order whips and leather mask and leather gears and gags, and I see all these catalogs, and I just go, wow. And I look over, and he goes, come on over here, and he's showing me what he's drawing at the time. He goes, I'm creating a new book. It's called Warrior Nun, Ariella, Warrior Nun, Ariella. And I went, oh, okay. And he's showing me pages, and he's like, what do you think? And I was like, man, it's incredible. I've never seen this stuff before. I thought it was amazing. So then I realized, oh, that's reference material.
Oh, yeah.
That's why he has this stuff.
You just thought it was some creep.
Yeah, at first I was like, whoa, what's this guy into? And so he sets that stuff aside, and he shows me a script, and he says, like, I've got this book that I want to eventually get you to, but right now I need a cover. He goes, can you draw Bio Booster Guyver for me? And I had no idea what that was. I had never heard of it. I had only ever seen. I couldn't afford comics, and I think at the time I owned about 5 or 6 comic books when I started wanting to draw comics. So I didn't have a collection. I didn't grow up reading comics. So I lied at that moment and said, yeah, oh yeah, I like that. And then he goes, okay. He gave me artboard. He goes, here's artboard. Because I noticed your drawings were on paper. Don't do that. Draw on the artboard. Because if you want, do your layout, your rough on the paper, and then start drawing on the artboard. And he gave me a pretty good amount. He gave me maybe 10 sheets. And I was just doing one cover. So he gave me a lot of extra. And it was Antarctic Bristol board, and it was great. I had never seen it. And I said, all right, great. No, that's amazing. So when is it due? And he said, well, can you run it back to me by tomorrow? And I said, yeah, no problem. I'll get it done tonight. I'll bring it in tomorrow. So I pack up my portfolio, because we had a few of them out there. He was going over some art with me and kind of give me a little bit of pointers. So I put my artwork back in my portfolio. I walk back down through the bullpen where all the artists are working, and I just think, wow, it's a dream. This is a dream, It felt so surreal. And I go down that hallway. I finally get to the lobby, and again, all the artists are crowded around talking to my ex-wife, And I mean, I get it. I mean, she's beautiful, she's cute, They're all like just there hanging out around her, and so I didn't want to interrupt some of the conversations. They were talking to her and showing her a lot of mangas and stuff like that, because that's primarily what they do, and they're showing their work to her, and so she gets up and she's, are you ready? I said, yeah, and we start walking out, and I said, I got a job. And she's like, that's amazing. That's great. And she's like, what does it pay? I said, I don't know. I didn't ask. She's like, oh, okay. Well, what is the job? I said, I have to draw something like the Giver. She's like, what is that? I said, I don't know. So one of the guys is walking out behind us to smoke. He's getting ready to smoke his cigarette, and he laughs and he hears me. And he said, if you go down this road right here, there's a comic store just right down the street. Go in there. They have the Guyver. They'll have it. They specialize in manga, because at that time, not every comic store carried this stuff. It was a niche thing. And so he directed us down there, and so we go, and we get in there. I walk in the store, and they're the 2 nerdiest young kids working behind the counter, and my wife, my ex-wife at the time, she says, when she walked in, she goes, oh my God, we are in nerd headquarters. And I was like, why do you say that? She goes, oh my God. And the smell. I was like, yeah, you can smell the paper. She's like, no, and body odor. I was like, oh yeah, that too. That's the difference, in the 90s. It was like fresh paper and body odor, So I walk up to the young man and I go, I'm looking for something called the Gaver. And he goes, and he just starts laughing. He does the nerdiest laugh in the world. And he looks to the other guy, and they both, like a weird little Martian laugh, you know, and they just, and they're like, they were somehow they understood and they could communicate and they didn't say much, but yet they got why they were laughing, you know? And we're outside the joke and we're just standing there like waiting for them, you know, and then they turn around and he goes, "You mean Bio Booster Guyver?" And I said, "Yes, that comic book. I want that." And then they laugh again. And then they turn back, they look at us, "It's a manga. It's not." And they lecture me about the difference between mangas and comic books. So we
Yeah.
stand there and I'm getting lectured by the nerdiest kids about the manga. And so they finally hand me the manga. The manga itself cost me about, at the time, I think it was like $12.99. So it was pretty pricey for the reference material. So I go home, I draw this cover, so excited about it. I pencil, ink it, I'm all excited. I take it back the next morning, all excited. And Ben Dunn approves it, likes it. I said, "Great, I like what you did. Here's the script. All right, I'm going to give you more work." And I was like, "Wow, I got more work." He goes, "Here you go." And he cuts me a check for my cover. My first professional work, and I'm going to share with everybody here, was $50 for a cover. And then keep in mind, I paid $12.99 for a reference. So that was even less. But yeah, that was my first work, drawing the Guyver, and that was my introduction into the comic world, you know?
Wow, dude. That's like that's one of those old timey stories that you don't hear today. Like people don't go, they don't cold approach people at a studio and show them their work. Like I don't even know if you can really do that anymore because I've heard art directors they kind of shut that down because everybody's there
Yeah.
working. So you either
Yeah.
go to conventions or you got to find some other way to like reach out and make connections with people. It's not
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah, publishers no longer have studios or offices anymore. Everyone's pretty much remote now. I think you could still walk into the Marvel office or DC offices, but even that's pretty scarce nowadays. You know, and today we live in a generation of the age of information. So
Mhm.
everybody claims to be an expert in everything. You know,
Yeah.
and but I love to hear the stories where, how people discovered pop culture, comic
Yeah.
books. What was the first comic book you ever went to? What's the first convention? Like I love that stuff, but whenever I ask the current the younger generation now, like Gen is it Gen Zers now? No, Gen
Mhm.
Y or whatever the newer generation is. Whenever I ask these younger people, they're like, "Oh yes, well you see now the pop culture was created back in blah blah blah," and they try to give you like a history lesson and claim to be an expert. I'm like, but okay, that's great. I could find the Wikipedia page too, but you're not. But you weren't always an expert. You know, when was that time? It's okay to be, you know, to say at one time, I had no idea this culture existed, you know?
Mhm.
And it seems like
Yeah,
people today are afraid to say that.
that's the most exciting thing, right? Is like, especially when you're a kid, uh, coming across something for the first time and being like, "What is this?" Like, I remember what made me want to do comics. My biggest inspiration, like, I'd always read X-Men and Batman and stuff like that, but it was Spawn. Like,
Oh,
what?
wow.
It was Spawn. I
Yeah.
mean, like he was such a force in the 90s, like the way that he did everything, the way that he set himself up with the animation and the movie and then the
Yeah.
games and then the comics. Like he saw where pop culture entertainment was going and he just was like, okay, I'm going to build this thing. And so it was just so cool to see this guy put his creativity everywhere, you know, the games, the game, the toys, the
Yeah.
comics, the film, the animation series, all of that blew up in the 90s. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
That's really kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, this is before, like you said, before all the big movies. This is really back when Hollywood was just starting to test out, you know, creations from the comic book market. So the Ninja Turtles was one of the big things that really helped open that door. And then
Totally.
you had different you had like the Crow came in, it was very successful, and you know we had different things that eventually came from them. But I think the Ninja Turtles was one of the primary things that made Hollywood look over. And the great thing about Todd McFarlane was that he's also very business minded.
Hmm.
And what I like about Todd McFarlane is that he's also honest about, he was, you know, he's honest and said, well, he didn't grow up in comics. He didn't read comic books. He knew of very little comics. And even till this day, he still reads, he doesn't read a lot of comics now as a creator, you know, because now you're busy, you're making comic books. And And I like that transparency and that honesty that Todd McFarlane shares, because there seems to be this people that like the current generation seem to think and believe that no, you have to be a hardcore comic book fan in order to make a good comic book. You know,
Hmm.
where it's not necessarily true, because comic books are a storytelling medium. You just have to be a good storyteller with a very creative character, and be able to tell a good story to make a
Hmm.
good comic book. You know.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's it's interesting that people would think in that very limited way because, like you said, it's just a storytelling medium. That's all it is. You know, you can take your inspiration from so many other things. I mean, it should be primarily from probably from life, right?
Yeah.
But the experience of like going and reading novels, like one of like I was telling you, you know, I live in Thailand now, and I'm trying to take reading and learning Thai very seriously because I have
Wow.
this idea in my mind of like I want to read a book in a foreign language. Like, what kind of inspiration could you get that you couldn't get from reading something in your normal language? Like, you learn a foreign language and then you read like one of their books or like one of their folk tales or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
that's an inspiration that is only available to like a small group of people,
Yep.
right? And that's what I love. I love finding like these things that like new. It's like new territory that hasn't really been explored. And I guess like you were saying before the podcast, I guess that's why people gravitate more towards manga because it feels like with manga, the books are not they're not superhero stuff or only superhero stuff. Like they have all these genres and they're kind of exploring these different stories. I
Yep.
mean, there's so many of them. They're brilliant, like brilliant ideas.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of genre. There's comedies. There's they also still have the romance, where at one time, the comic book market for us branched out, and there were the romance novels. There were some of the more of the teen kind of comic books with the Jughead and the Archie and all those comic books. And then there were the horror comic books, and so it was a diversity in genre. But unfortunately, it just seems like that the superhero has dominated in here, and people seem to think, going back with that the mindset that I think people are in today, is where you have to be a hardcore fan of superhero in order to create a good comic book. Well, I think if you're a hardcore superhero fan and very knowledgeable in who Batman fought in issue number 183, or to have that, that's only useful if you're going to be working in Batman. If you're going to be doing just superheroes, and that's great. But for me, being inspired, like going back to Todd McFarlane, I grew up in that age. I discovered comic books through Image. So for me, I was introduced to the entrepreneur. I was, introduced to the the creative person was also a business owner, because they all owned, Jim Lee owned Wildstorm, Mark's Vestry Top Cow, and so they all had their own companies, and that's the way I was introduced. So I knew right from the start that that's where I was headed. That's what I want to do, is that I want to own an IP, because starting out with a small company like Antarctic Press, where Ben Dunn created Warrior Nun Ariella, and it became very successful. It was one of their most successful titles. The only other title that topped that at that time was a spin-off book called Shotgun Mary, which is a character that came from that book. And it actually outsold that and made them a lot of money. Being in that environment, I realized you have to own something. That's what you want. You want to be able to, own something. And some people that have been fortunate enough in the mainstream get equity in a character they create, but they don't own that character. They kind of share that. They just have an equity in it. So the profits that character makes for these big companies, you get a very small percentage. So I mean, that's something, but I want the whole pie. I want to be able to own this character. And like Todd McFarlane, the other thing that he does, you mentioned animation, movies, and you said games. He also licensed out Spawn, where Spawn, you'll see him. He'll be inside a video game. He's a DLC character for Mortal Kombat,
Hmm.
or in Call of Duty, or something. And those companies, in order to use his his IP. They license it. They pay Todd McFarlane.
Yeah, it's so smart, man. I mean, like I think that I've worked as I've worked as like a freelance illustrator, and I've always wanted to do my own IP. I'm in the process of like what I'm doing is I'm taking I don't know if you know who Philip K. Dick is, the
Yes. Oh
science
yeah.
fiction writer. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So I have video essays that I like go through his journals, and then I go through the films that are based off of his books, and I look for the inspirations, and I find connections there. And then I have comics that I'm taking um, his like public domain short stories and turning them into comics right now as a way to teach myself how to
Oh
make the
wow.
comics.
Yeah.
But I have like my own IP in the background. But anyway, my point was that I think from coming from an illustrator's point of view, for some reason we have this idea of like working for somebody else.
Yeah.
Like it's not as entrepreneurial as like what you're saying, like a comic artist or even a novelist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, So is this the first IP it is that you have owned, or is this?
I've got thousands and thousands of ideas in my head.
Yeah.
I think most of us do, but
Mhm.
this is the first one that I'm actually branching out to do because when the cancel culture seemed to start, it seemed to be first I kind of heard of it, and then I started to see people get canceled that I knew,
Mhm.
and I started to go, oh my god, okay, these companies, they at any time, any point, they can just not only can they take you off a project and fire you, but it's such a small market. You can easily get blacklisted for making the wrong joke that they
Mhm.
didn't understand, or saying something they didn't agree with, or going against their narrative or whatever. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, it's so simple now that why you can get canceled. And some very very talented people have gotten canceled. And I went, man, well, what's the way that I don't have to worry about getting fired because during the pandemic that we had here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Or I mean world, I mean it was everywhere basically, but here in the U.S. we did pencils down where they companies stopped producing comic books for some time, and that meant um, if you had a saving account, you're going to dip in that saving account. But a lot of artists don't have that; they don't have a plan B, so a lot of people suffered through that. So that I realized, well, what is a way that I can avoid, for one, getting fired, or if they decide, hey, we want to bring in, we found a cheaper artist, we want to bring in somebody else, or hey, we didn't like what you said here or there, and cancel. And I realized, well, that's to own my own company,
Mhm.
and crowdfunding has made that possible, where I can go directly to fans and consumers and I reach out to them and I have their support. They make a contribution, and that's how I was able to make a startup company where I could now start publishing my own books, and hopefully I can get to the point where I can start hiring other artists out there and be able to create more work for others as well. But I would really encourage everybody to make their own company so that way, because even if you were say working for me, then that's the same thing basically, where even I could say at one point, well, I mean, there's less work, or hey, we're going to change directions.
Yeah.
It's still a what if situation. But if you have your own company, I think that's uh, it's crazy to say, but I think that's much more stable.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's getting to that point where I feel like there's a guy that I listen to. He's like this. He's this entrepreneur guy, angel investor. His name is Naval Ravikant, and he had this idea that basically where the economy is going is that everybody is basically going to be their own business. And
Yeah,
then you're going to come together with other people that own their own businesses in order to do creative projects. And then once that creative project is done, then you're going to go back to doing whatever independent service it is that you're providing. Right.
yeah,
And like it makes sense because like it's getting to the point where like like a big organization, um, if you join a big organization, like you said, they can get rid of you because they're always looking for the cheapest way it is that they can get the job done. But it also doesn't have the same maneuverability as somebody who's like on a smaller team or doing something on their own. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Yeah, it almost seems like it can get to a point where it's unmanageable.
And what's really key too, I think, not only, I mean, coming up with something creative, don't just do another version of Batman. Don't try not to just do another version of the X-Men or whatever. Try to do something. I mean, of course, something that you're interested in, but something innovative, something that isn't. I mean, people I mean, there is superhero fatigue out there.
Mm-hmm.
It is happening because there's just so many people all trying to get on that gold rush where they saw Marvel movies hitting billions and
Hmm.
successful. Even Marvel tried to produce more and more, product out there, more and more movies, and just saturated this market out there. So, when it came time to create something, I did a little research and thought about, well, what could I create that's different,
Hmm.
and I focused on characters and something very unique. But not only that, you also having a good team when
Hmm.
as far as when creating a comic book, it's very important to try to put together the best team possible. And I've been very fortunate to have very, very talented people that have wanted to work with me, and I'm very, very fortunate. I think primarily because of that was because of the reputation that I have built in the comic book industry, where and the friendships that I've made and the networking, and having a really good team together and with a very unique IP has made us stand out, and people are really starting to take notice. And I've done very little marketing, and I'm really learning as I go, and a lot of it is just guerrilla marketing and
Hmm.
where we haven't even reached. Uh, I haven't learned quite um, the best way to market yet, but we will.
Hmm.
We'll get there. But we still, even though we're fumbling in marketing, still have some success. I mean, the
Dude,
books.
what I'm going to pull up. I'm going to present on this page here so we can actually look at your book. But what are you at currently right now? You're at like 38,000 on Indiegogo or Kickstarter.
Indiegogo, and I think we're about $700 short of 38,000.
$30,000, dude. That is, if you're saying that you don't do a lot of marketing, that's pretty insane. Like, what does your marketing? I'm going to share my screen now for people that are watching it and pull up this comic. So we're looking at, yeah. So like, what do you mean you're not doing any kind of marketing? You,
Yeah.
you got $30,000, man. I
No,
mean, that's
yeah, 38 almost.
for
We're at
38.
37,000. We're just about $700 short, maybe 37,200 around there. And
Wow.
but if you go to Indiegogo site and you type in or just Google Dragon Rage: The Crown of Fire
Hmm.
Indiegogo, and it'll find it. 'Cause this is actually older artwork right here. This is a preview that I did,
Hmm.
and I actually decided that I was gonna redraw the entire book. So I've actually
Mm.
redrawn all these pages, and
So I should go to Indiegogo, is what you're saying?
Indiegogo, yeah, or you can type in Indiegogo Dragon Rage. And this is my actually my third campaign, but it'll be listed as my first. So when you type in Dragon Rage on Indiegogo, you'll see my other two previous campaigns that have already been fulfilled and completed.
Oh, okay, so you've
See,
done this before then.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and
Okay, so this is not. I was under the impression this was absolutely your first.
yeah, no, it's actually my third campaign. The other two, I did all this directly off my own website. I created my own platform. And I mean, I created my own channel on YouTube, built an audience on there, a very small audience, and they all supported me. And this is what we had done back then. So this is the
Mhm.
older campaign that we did back in 2020 and fulfilled it. And I mean, all the backers were very happy and asking when we're going to do the next one. And so it took about 2 years to really we asked a lot of the for feedback and to figure out what worked as far as story, what people liked, and then we went back to the drawing board and adjusted characters and revamped the story. And I also took a lot of time to improve my art.
Mhm.
Yeah, that right there was actually my wife.
Mm.
And I had her one day. I said, "Hey, let me. I need to draw you." So within Dragon Rage, there's a lot. She's in there. She's my reference. But yeah, that
So
was it.
do you look at a lot of do you shoot your own reference or do you look at reference
Y-
online or
I try to just shoot my own reference whenever I need to. Either for the guy, it would be a photo of myself. And right there, I have a photograph. I should one day share of my wife like that. She had her hands up and was doing that pose for
Mm,
me, and so I had taken a photo and then used it as reference, and was able to get that because back then I relied a lot on reference.
mhm.
This is actually the first comic book. That was the first comic book that I had ever drawn because I had spent my
Wow.
entire career, 30 years as an inker,
Hmm.
and then said I want to do my own comic book. But the thing was, I had never drawn a comic book, so this was
But
my
you had you hadn't, but you had. I mean the
yeah.
composition. You knew what to look for in terms of the composition and like how to block everything out. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, there are some things you learn as an inker, but there's so much more that you will learn when you're actually penciling, as far as camera angles and storytelling and things like that. So it's been a challenge for me.
mhm.
I decided to go back and redo the book, and then I started again on this new one, and then in about 4 months into it, I said, you know what? I'm going to start over again. So I started over
Huh.
again. And this time around, I'm actually, the first book was 22 pages. This book was 40 pages. By the time I finished, I would have, because I redrew pages, I will have drawn 64 pages.
Nice.
So hopefully, I mean, and I have gotten feedback. People have already told me, they can see a big leap improvement in my art from the last one. And
Totally.
and that's just from drawing every day, learning, hanging out with other creators, other talented artists, and getting their feedback, and then being competitive with them.
Mhm. Totally.
Right? They show me their work, and then I go, I want to do better. So
Yeah. Damn, man. Yeah, you're
yeah,
really good,
thanks.
and
Yeah,
you got some.
got to the point
You
now where I,
go
I
ahead.
just draw now, out of my head. I don't
Yeah.
reference anymore. I don't use very many photos. There are still some times where a particular camera angle or something's a bit tough, and you know, um, I'll ask my wife, hey, need you again? Need you to model for me again? Or usually it's with the hands. At the beginning of the book, I was always like, do this with your hand or that with your hand. And I've gotten to the point now where I pretty much I don't even need that anymore. I'm just almost everything's straight out of my head.
That's cool. Let's check out this trailer. Is that cool? Is it a cool
Yeah.
trailer?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Let me go ahead and play this real quick for people. Dragali, the true dragon masters. Humans with the rare ability to capture the rage of the dragons, wielding their powers as their own.
That's just to make sure everybody's awake at the end. It's like um,
That's cool, man.
yeah,
That's really cool.
and doing this, I'm truly independent. I mean, everything. I do everything on my own. I did all the video edit, the trailer, all on my own. I didn't have anyone helping. And then at the time when I created a trailer, I needed a promo, but I didn't really have any art done. I just had those few pages done at the time. But it was time; it was due. I was like, oh, I need a trailer. So what I put together, with at the time with very little artwork.
Yeah, man, that's pretty impressive. Like you pretty much do everything, and I know that's a ton of work because you got to make the book and then you got to do the marketing. So I'm
Yeah.
curious what your okay. So you said you built a tiny audience for your first book off of YouTube. Were you
Yes.
just streaming yourself working on the book and talking about it? Was that basically, and then inviting
Well,
other people on, or?
what I did was I didn't do any streaming. I was doing art tutorials, showing people, sharing tips and techniques. A lot of people were very interested in how to ink traditionally. So at the time, I wasn't digital, so I showed everybody, how I ink with a quill, how I used a brush, what tools I use, and I was very fortunate. My channel quickly grew to 15,000 subscribers.
Oh
Grew
wow.
very quickly. Whenever you make videos, you have to be offering something that your audience
Hmm.
wants. And so something that they're interested in. So I did that, and then I didn't start streaming until right before the book. I started doing live streams and inviting on different friends and different guests, and was just um, doing a lot of art streams, live demos, show people how to draw, interviewing my peers there. I had Meredith Finch, David Finch on. I
Hmm.
had Andrew Dollhouse showing people how to color, and different working professionals in the mainstream were
Hmm.
coming out and doing that. But then when it came time to work on my book, uh, there's no time for running my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel has suffered, and although I still have about 15,000 subscribers, but it's growing much slower now because I'm not putting any content up there at least until after I finish my book. But it's a lot of work. I mean, I have a website where I now have a newsletter because I've learned that you need to build a newsletter, a mailing list.
Hmm.
So what I did was I created a website so people go there and put your email in and get on my mailing list to keep me, stay up to date with everything,
Hmm.
and maintaining that mailing list, sending out newsletters. I have a blog, doing a blog. I still try to live stream as often as I can. Meanwhile, at the same time, still having to do all the art on the book, still having to, go on social media and promote on all social media. It's so much work, and then taking the time, to join podcasts like this and live streams because, if
Hmm.
somebody's willing to take the time to show my book and offer, I mean, hey, you can't pass that up. That's very valuable, very crucial, to what I'm doing. So it is. It's a whole lot. It's a whole lot of work. One thing I'd recommend, and you're already doing this, is that I have a Gumroad where I offer digital products, and
Hmm.
not only are my products for sale, but I also offer a lot of free products for artists that are digital. You can go there and get free templates and free brushes and all kinds of stuff. So when they sign up for that, you have to just trade me your email. So you join my mailing list. So I've been doing that now throughout the my campaign. I now have 5,000 emails on
Nice.
my mailing list. So my next campaign, I'm going to have what I didn't have at the beginning of this one. Somehow, yet we were still able to get it to 38,000, close to 38,000, and we're still going. So the next one will be even bigger. Hopefully with that mailing list.
Yeah, that's what you want, right? You want to build an email newsletter list of people that are regularly engaging with what it is that you're giving to them. So whenever you're
Yes.
sending out these newsletters, are you firing something off every week, or you just send something whenever you have something to show?
Pretty much whenever I have some show, I do it about once a month.
Okay.
I will let people know, hey, there's a new brush on Gumroad. I just uploaded a new brush and it's free. Guys, go get it. Or hey, I created a graphic for those that are really interested and like the artwork in Dragon Rage. I made a wallpaper desktop. It's free. Go get it. Or I just had a live stream and I had so and so on there talking about the business of comics, or this writer talking about writing. If you guys are interested in, so I just whenever I have anything, I will put that out on the newsletter. I post it on social media, and then I go in my blog, and then I put it in the
Okay.
blog. I mean, so it's still a lot of work, but it seems to be working.
But okay, so what I'm curious about is what it sounds like you're saying is that the audience that you created on YouTube are people that are interested in being comic artists,
Yes.
and that was enough of a crossover for people to support your book to that level of getting 38,000 was like people that are interested in drawing comics.
Yeah, people that are interested in drawing comics, they also would help promote as well and say, "Hey, I just
Okay.
backed this book," and then they have their fans out there that would like what they're doing, and then would see my work and it would and would come on over. Um, but the majority of the people are interested in comic books, but there are fans that scroll across YouTube, and I end up in their feed, and they see it and they go, "Oh, I want to back this." But I do go on social media, and I share on Facebook. I share primarily on Twitter, and hashtag indie comics and fantasy
Mhm.
comic or whatever. And anybody following those hashtags, find me in fans. But it does work. And I think because comic book artists out there, they're curious. They want to see, well, how did he create this comic book? And then they buy my product, my book, because they want to see, well, how does this work print? What does this work look like?
Mhm.
And a lot of times, they want to have it because you want to have work of an artist whose work you either admire or you're just curious about, and that, I mean, that's what I do. I do the same thing. I mean, I buy a lot of like Mark Silvestri books, and I
Mhm.
keep them handy because I really love his work. And whenever he does Kickstarters, I'm there backing his stuff. So yeah,
Mhm.
it does work.
It's interesting because what I've also heard is that you want to expand your reach outside of people that are just into like the comic stuff. Like, what is it that you think appeals about your? Actually, I don't even. We didn't even talk about the story. What is the story about? Like, how is? Do you feel like that has an appeal that goes beyond just like if you're a comic book fan? You know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
it seems like the new territory will be like people are getting into people have the opportunity to get into comics now because of the digital medium that weren't into them before, and so it's like, oh, I'm into like medieval fantasy type stuff. I'm into Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
I'm into that sort of thing. What's this comic? Oh, this comic is adjacent to the thing that I already like, and then boom, that's kind of the door into like a new audience, right?
Yeah, and the thing too that I did was coming in and wanting to do a crowdfunding book. I knew that I was going to do something outside of superhero because the superhero market is saturated.
Yeah,
I can't compete with 75, 80 years of
yeah.
fans from DC Comics. They're not going to abandon Batman. For my version of Batman. So I knew right away that wasn't something I wanted to do. So I researched and found that fantasy is the largest and the most popular genre, anywhere, in any medium. That's the biggest one. So I decided, okay, I want to do something in fantasy. And besides that, I really love fantasy. I grew up with the Savage Sword of Conan. I mean, not grew up, but when I say grew up, I mean grew up from the time that I got into comics to now, which has been 30, 5 years or something. But
Hmm.
I really love that genre very much. So it was very easy for me to get into. And then when you were mentioning Game of Thrones, well, those that are fans of Game of Thrones, when you produce a television show, it's a lot of work. So there's like a huge gap in between seasons.
Hmm.
So if I can reach those fans and say, hey, you know what? In between that time, I know that you're looking for your fix for Game of Thrones,
Hmm.
and George isn't that fast of a writer, so there's not it's not all these books to go look for in
Yeah.
between. In between that time, take a look at this. This comic book. I can put out more comics in between that time, and keep them going with fantasy
Hmm.
and so the thing for me is that trying to go outside the market. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get my book out there. I need to satisfy the backers that I have right now. We're funded. We have the funding that we need to produce the comic. We're nearly completed with the comic book. I want to get the book out there, get people hyped, talking about it. And then I want to start branching out and going into tabletop. Not I don't want to do tabletop, but I want to reach those fans of tabletop
Hmm.
games,
Hmm.
people that do role playing games, D and D's, all that kind of stuff. And Even the video games, the people that play a lot of like Elder Scrolls and anything fantasy related, people that are into House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones television shows or The Witcher. I want to start branching out and reaching those people. And then, so what I'm doing now is just researching, trying to find out like where are they hanging out? Like where is I know a lot of them like on places like they go to Reddit or they're on Facebook groups and there's different areas. So eventually
Mhm.
I'll be reaching out to them and showing them the product and trying to get
Mhm.
those people excited.
There's something that I found as well, that a lot of people are just hanging out in Discord servers.
Discord, yeah,
Like
yeah,
if you go into like one of those Discord, I think you can just Google like Discord search chats or whatever, and you can basically find an index of like all the Discord chats, and you can
yeah,
just put in like fantasy, and then you can go and you can jump into those and start sharing your stuff. Because I've noticed that Discords are very active. It's interesting. Like each one of these areas online, they'll kind of have like an arc to them, right? Like they'll get to a certain point where they become so oversaturated with content that it becomes difficult for people that are doing something like what we're doing to utilize them. Like Instagram is a perfect example of that. Like I,
yeah,
I have I have posts scheduled every day just to have it there, and you'll still get like, and I mean it's been posting every day for I don't know how long, for a month or whatever, but it'll still be like the same 6 people see it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
like like the algorithm has changed so much, but it's also because of the amount of stuff that's there, and so
yeah.
people seem to like migrate to these other areas where it's more where it's not so big, I guess.
Yeah, plus these bigger social media platforms have a lot of bots, so you want to go where it's
Yeah.
real people because you
Yeah.
can't. It's hard to monetize on Instagram.
Mhm.
Even when I show people my book and things, I don't think I've converted any post on Instagram to a customer or not customer to a contributor on Indiegogo. I don't think Instagram is. I don't think I have one from Instagram, but I've got quite a
Wow.
bit from my primary is from YouTube, and the secondary would be Twitter.
Okay.
The other thing too is I've slowly getting to know influencers on YouTube that are in the D&D scene. They talk about D&D or they talk about the a lot of the role playing stuff. Slowly getting to know them, and I've been showing them some of my work, and they are all very impressed with it. But what I want to do is, once my book is out, I want to send them copies, get them excited, so that hopefully they'll present it to their viewers.
Mhm.
And try to branch out and reach out that way. Because right now, primarily everybody on my mailing list are artists, and most of my backers are artists themselves.
That's really cool though that they've been able to support what you do, and you've been able to build an audience off of just basically teaching people. So you're
Yeah,
you're a teacher as well as, I mean, it's the idea of what we were talking about with what McFarland did, where he built basically like legs to a business to keep it afloat. I mean, it seems like that's what you've also done. Do you sell tutorials as well? Do you
No,
have?
the how I attract people to my YouTube is that I offer my tutorials for free. So
Okay.
all my tutorials are on my YouTube channel. They're absolutely free. There are a few. I created this thing called the digital inking kit, and where I found a niche where there had never been a comic book, a professional comic book inker that went digital. So
Okay.
most of the people that were using the digital products to ink were artists who had no idea how to ink, and they couldn't use a quill or a brush
Mhm.
traditionally. So they decided, well, I'm going to use a digital program so that I can fake it and make it easy, make it easier. So they made
Yeah.
brushes, and they were horrible.
Mhm.
You could tell
Yeah.
they were digital, and
Yeah.
people were really wanting a traditional look. So you couldn't get work as a digital inker because pencilers were like, nah, I don't want this digital look over my traditional
Mhm.
pencils. So I had to go in and create tools that could could mimic and recreate the
Oh,
look
wow.
of traditional tools. And it took me a long time. And so I did that. created these tools, and I started inking guys like Brett Booth and David Finch, and people couldn't tell it was digital. People were just like, "Wow, this is amazing." So then when digital artists found out,
Mm-hmm.
they started going, "Hey, do you offer brushes and a brush set?" And I went, "No." And I thought, well, I could either keep it to myself and stay an inker and stay, nobody will know how I'm doing this because it's my own brushes.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can open it up and offer all these products. And I've already been thinking about becoming a creator and no longer becoming an inker. So why not make some money, create a revenue for myself? And that's the
Mm-hmm.
decision that I went with. I said, well, I'm going to offer my brushes out there. And so with those brushes, I do have tutorials in there on how I use the brushes, and I give some tips on some inking tips, but primarily it's all about the brushes and everything. And it's
Okay, because I'm
mhm.
looking at your. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm looking at your page right now because I am actually curious, and I just clicked on brushes, and there's nothing
Yeah,
here.
no, I haven't linked it to my Gumroad yet. This is
Okay.
a new site I built when I started launching my book, and then producing a book. It takes so much work. So a lot of these things, yeah, if you do Jimmy Reyes art and then Gumroad, yeah, and it'll if you go on there, and that this has been very successful. If you look at it, I mean, 5 stars on almost everything. It's
Nice.
yeah, look at that. I mean, 5 stars over there, 4.9 over here, and
Oh,
tons of reviews, and people just really love it. I'm so grateful. It's very successful that it's become a way for me to augment my income. It's a steady income that just comes right in.
that's really cool, man. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. I've been doing some tutorials. The way that I've been doing tutorials is a little bit different. I plan on doing like more in depth stuff, but I wasn't sure how I wanted to approach it yet. But I've been looking at just I like doing these illustration masterclass videos that I have on my channel. That's what I call them. And basically, I just pull up somebody's art and I just start breaking down like the design decisions and stuff like that. Like, what are
Yeah.
the decisions that they're making, and
Wow.
like because what I've noticed, and I know you can attest to this, is that a lot of it comes down to the understanding of the Pareto principle, right? Like 20% of the decisions makes 80% of the effect, right? And so when you see an illustration that's really well done, like from David Finch or something like that, if you break that down into a thumbnail, even a small little thumbnail, it's still readable, it's still dynamic, it's still interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean that's something that I learned from like looking at Frazetta and from his career, and that's something that always sticks with me as like the golden rule of like like Frazetta, he wanted you to walk through a bookstore and then you saw one of the Conan books from across the room and it just pulled you to it because
Hmm.
he's using these big shapes and it's very dramatic and it's very the composition is very strong.
And it's funny that you
And
said when you reduce it down to a thumbnail, it should still be readable, which is
yeah.
also the way that illustration starts. The artist, a lot of professional artists will start with a thumbnail
Mm-hmm.
just to see how that. It's a quick way to find out without putting too much work into it to find out if the illustration works. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and so that's great. I mean, you're kind of reverse engineering it in that
Mm-hmm.
process, and I think that's gonna make those make great videos.
Yeah.
You're offering something really valuable there, and you should be getting. I'm pretty sure if you continue with that, you'll get a lot of views. It takes time though on YouTube for people to find you. You know,
Okay. Yeah, because I've been going at it for about a year, and I'm pretty consistent with putting out like a podcast every week right now,
yeah.
and then putting out a podcast and then doing like a tutorial video every week. That's pretty much. Well, how many times a week were you posting?
I was posting about once a month, and it took me maybe it took me about 2 years before I really started picking up steam on on YouTube. But at the time too, I was offering inking, and there seemed like there was no one at the time that was doing that. There was, Richard Friend, I don't think had his channel, and Sandra Hope didn't have hers, and I was the only inker on YouTube. So it, so it picked up. fairly quickly. You know, I know that there are people that have a lot of successful people that have been on YouTube much longer
Hmm.
before they really hit their million subscriber count. You know.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah. It just takes time. Yeah, you're right. It's consistency. It's getting through that middle path where you feel like you're basically just talking to yourself.
Yeah, and
You know what I mean?
it's a lot of work. You have to look for analytics in the back. You know want to make sure see what the engagement is. Um, you know what was the view length? You know how long did people watch? What did they watch? You know, and then you can kind of go through and figure out. Well, okay, so they really like this part of this video. I need to do more of this. This is what
Okay.
my audience wants. Because it's different for everyone because your audience is going to be different than mine. You know,
Yeah.
so your analytics in the background are very important. A lot of back end stuff is very important. SEO, search engine optimization. It's also very information. What kind of keywords you're using for the
Hmm.
search engine.
Hmm.
What's in your title? You know the way you title your video. That's very important. On the way that the algorithm, the AI works within YouTube. Also your thumbnail because your thumbnail is your cover and like you said, Frank Frazetta, you want some very visual stimulating thumbnails that attract people to go, whoa, they want to click on it, even if it's clickbait. You know, you just
Yeah.
get them in there because once they're watching the video, most likely then they're going to continue watching. You know, or hopefully they're gonna. The goal is to get them to keep watching the video. But yeah,
Totally.
it's just going through figuring out what works in your video and offering more of that.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Totally. Cool, man. Well, I wanna respect your time. I don't want to take up your whole evening. Um, but I guess if you want to go ahead and give us a plug of like all the links for everything for your Gumroad, for your YouTube, your Twitter, and for your Indiegogo. All of that stuff will be in the description box below for anybody that's interested in checking out Jimmy's stuff as well as my stuff. That'll also be linked below. But I guess do you want to give us like a plug of what to expect? Like how much longer do you have on the Indiegogo?
The Indigo is now in demand, and I should be done with the art completely done with the artwork in about 4 weeks. All the pencil art is done. I'm just now in the inking phase where I just ink and render the pages. I'm pretty quick in that phase, so about 4 weeks, and then off to the printer. Well, then I mean production. Of course, I have to paginate the book, and there's no ads in my book, so pagination is pretty quick, and lay out the book, do the production. That takes about 2 weeks to get back from the printer. So at about 6 to 8 weeks around there, then I'm gonna close out the campaign, which means it'll be permanently gone, and I will not. I'm not gonna offer these covers again because I'm not gonna print. I'm not gonna do an overprint or anything like that where I would later could sell them on eBay or my website. Most artists do that, and that's a very good idea. I'm not going to do that this time around because I have a special cover that's coming up from a very huge YouTuber who has
Mhm.
25 million subscribers. He did a cover
Whoa,
for me, so I'm going to be doing a second campaign, and I'm going to put him on that second campaign on the cover, and he's offered to help me, get that
that's
going. So that's going to be a lot of works. But so the covers that I'm offering right now, I'm going to make those limited, and then his cover will be a special edition, and a way to be able to offer more variations and things, and then keeping those the backers that did buy that first book, keeping them really happy as to hey, that was a very limited run. I'm glad I backed it because now it's something special with this big YouTuber coming in. It's going to make the IP bigger, and I know a lot of those people are going to go, man, I wish I could get these covers from the that first campaign. And the good thing for my backers would be like, hey, if they wish to, they can put that up on eBay, when the demand's higher for the IP. So I'm trying to give something, trying to think of them and not always just trying to think of a way to just make money myself,
totally.
which is the goal is I want to make a living. Yeah. I mean, I want to be, business minded, but at the same time, I want my backers to feel they got their money's worth and with both the story and maybe even on the secondary market.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. Wow. that's the other thing. Like, it's a lot of work. There's so much work it is that you have to put into this. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much you got to give it almost everything. Like, yeah,
14 hours of every day is
yep,
dedicated to putting out
mhm,
this book. Yeah.
yep. But the other side of that is that there's no gatekeepers now. Like,
Yeah.
they're useless now. Like, you can make a connection with somebody who's got 25 million viewers. You guys hit it off, and you guys are buddies. And then all of a sudden, boom, your book is opened up to a whole new group of people that
Yeah.
you wouldn't have had access to.
Even if 1% of his fans back my book, I mean, that's still a huge number
How
and a
much?
very successful campaign,
Yeah, I mean, how much would that be? That would be like in the thousands.
Yeah, like 25,000, I think, right? At
Oh my
1%, that's still, I mean, the largest, some of the larger campaigns hit like 22,000 backers,
God.
something like that, or they get 18,000 backers. And those are the multi-million dollar campaigns, so even if I just got 1%, it'd still be a very successful campaign. So, the thing is, I just got to make sure I get it to to his fans, and he's offered to help me to spread the word and do that. And I'm very, very grateful. And he's a good friend of mine, and I've known him for a very long time. And I'm very grateful. I mean, David Finch, a good friend of mine, he donated a cover for me. I've had various artists. They've all said, "Hey, I want to do a cover for you," and they've all have given me covers, like donated either, "Hey, here's the cover, pay me whatever you want,"
Yeah,
and they know that I'm a startup company. I mean, it's not like I have the
yeah,
biggest budget, but we had no idea my campaign was going to do 38,000. We had no no idea. I mean, I didn't know if it was even. I mean, I knew it was going to fund because I already have a decent amount of following. But so it's great to have friends like that helping out, just going. And then when it came time for Dave, like, hey, Dave's cover rate is in the thousands of dollars. He gets paid
yeah.
a lot of money. And so when it came time that my campaign made some money, he still said, "No, don't pay me." He goes, I don't, I want you to have this. This is my favor to you because
Hmm.
I helped him out, get his YouTube channel started and things like that. And he was so grateful. And, we're friends. And he even donated the original art. He said, "Here, I even want you to have the original artwork. I did this for you." So making friends, networking, man, it's really important when you're truly independent. You're by yourself. So
Yeah,
looking at my campaign, I can't take the credit. There's been so many people to help me along the way. My backers, especially guys like you, who have helped me get on their platforms. People that have retweeted my tweets. I mean, there's just so much help. Of course, the professional artists and people that have done covers and out there. So yeah, it's. I say now, it's a small industry, so don't burn bridges.
yeah, totally,
Yeah,
totally. Cool, man. I thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me.
yeah. Thank you.
It's like a mega dose of inspiration for sure.
Wow, thanks.
So all of Jimmy links, like I said, they'll be in the description box below. Feel free to check those out. So you're saying that the Indiegogo will still be live for the next 6 to 8 weeks? Is that
Yeah,
basically?
six to 8 weeks. It may go over, but I can't guarantee that. Just depends on how long it takes, to get the books back from the printer. Once I start fulfillment, the campaign will come down. At that point, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to basically get everybody's order in now, hopefully before I go to the printer, so that
Mhm.
I know how much I'm going to print. At that point, then I'm going to close it down because then I won't have be able to print any extras. So, for those that want to get in, get in on it now, within at least within the 8 weeks.
Okay, cool, man. All right. Well, thanks guys for watching. Go check out his Indiegogo. You got a couple more weeks or a couple more months to support it. So anyway, thanks guys for watching and take care.